It is, according to my math, a Friday. And I got a note from a couple different people pointing out to me, including Steve, by the way, and not me, another Steve, some other people, that the man known as the father of the Dodge Viper has passed away. His name is Roy Schoberg, and I'm using the American pronunciation as SJO. And I actually looked up how to pronounce, because you can find it on YouTube now. And Swedish speakers were explaining how to pronounce it. I can't do that. I can't. But I think most people in America would say Sjoberg, but S-J-O-B-E-R-G. He led the team responsible for bringing the Viper into production. He was 86 years old. Now, here's the deal. For those of you who don't know, and be a very small subset of people in my audience don't know this, that is the model of a Dodge Viper. I own an actual Dodge Viper that looks just like this. Red, 99. But of course, it came out before that. And he's the guy who conceived and got the whole project going at the beginning. So Lucas Bell wrote this, but I've seen the story widely reported. Roy Schoberg, the executive engineer behind the first generation Dodge Viper, and a man regarded as the father of the Viper, passed away on March 30th at the age of 86. He's not as well known, perhaps, as some of his contemporaries. The hellacious bite we associate with those early stripped-back V10 sports cars was all due to his vision and determination. And don't get me wrong, the man ran a team of people. There are a lot of people involved. It's not just one guy. So oftentimes one guy becomes synonymous with a car. And of course, he simply was in charge. So he was born in 1938 in Erie, Pennsylvania. But he spent most of his youth moving around because of his father's engineering degree. He landed in Michigan, attended Grosse Pointe High School, and graduated in 1956. He got a bachelor's of science in mechanical engineering from U of M, and then he started his automotive career with General Motors. There he worked alongside Zora Arkus Duntov, who of course is the man known as the father of the Chevrolet Corvette. And he worked there as a vehicle development manager. The two remained close until Duntov passed away in 1996 at the age of 86. So Sjoberg left GM after 25 years, went to Chrysler in 1985. But he brought some lessons from America's sports car with him. Following the debut of the Dodge Viper VM01 concept car in 1989, he was tasked with assembling a team to bring the Roadster to reality. Now, originally, the concept had a V8 in it. Can you imagine? So they put together a hand-assembled group of 85 employees known as Team Viper. They'd be responsible for one of the quickest turnarounds in the business. There's all kinds of stories about how this happened. But the Dodge Viper was shown at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit's Cobo Hall one year. And if you've ever been to these car shows, these car companies routinely wheel out cars that are really cool, and then they don't build them. Design concepts, we get some cues from this. If people really like the slope of that roof, we might use that in a later car. And somebody apparently asked the people at Chrysler, why do you guys keep doing that? You're taunting us. If you can build one, certainly you could build more. Why don't you build more? And so the story is that somebody asked that question, and somebody said, well, if you actually buy them, we'll build them. And the reaction was, yeah, we'd buy them. And so during its development, it was Sjoberg who was responsible for giving Lee Iacocca the ride that secured the car's future, ripping up and down some of the roads in Detroit, quite possibly Woodward Avenue. As a result of the team's hard work, the production version of the Viper arrived in showrooms in January of 1992, 36 months after the initial concept was first shown. That is amazing. There's the concept car. Okay, you and a group of 85 employees make that car. Do it as a production car. So they were never huge volume production cars. They were, in essence, hand-built in a special facility, but they got it done. So Sjoberg retired from the automotive industry in 1997, but remained a consultant for the likes of Maserati, Ferrari, even the U.S. military. He is survived by his wife of 63 years, He's got 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 1 great-granddaughter. In lieu of flowers, family was asking those interested in donating to the Friends of Inland Lakes Schools Fund. And Lucas Bell signs off and says, thanks for the good times, Roy. I can tell you that I got my Viper in the early days of COVID, and it just worked out that way. I saved my pennies. I saved my dimes. Beach Boys reference. And I've always wanted to get a Viper. And little known story, I've told it once or twice before, but years ago, my brother and I ran a magazine that we published, and I would write articles about Michigan things. And one of the things we wrote about was the Dodge Viper because it was made in Michigan. And my brother used that as an excuse to talk them into lending us a Dodge Viper. And Dodge had simply then just come out with the second generation that was a hardtop, because the first generation was only available as an open top. And I can tell you that when the first Dodge Vipers came out, they caused an uproar because the car was insane. V10, tons of horsepower, tons of torque, tires this wide. I mean, the thing just looks like a rocket. And I remember when they came out, you'd see them on the road. It's like, oh my gosh, Viper, you know. And there was a huge premium in trying to get your hands on one because the production numbers were so low. Cars were so desirable. I believe it was John Elway who got one. Big deal, you know. And then I remember people complaining, going, well, what do you do about the roof? Like, you know, what if it rains? They cobbled together some makeshift thing that you could put on it, but it looked really bad. It had like side curtains and stuff. But the original Viper was primitive in a good way. So, like, I don't believe it had outside door handles. Why would you need them? You can just reach inside and open the door up. It had that V10 engine. Why not? 6-speed, of course. And so I never drove a first-generation Viper, but I got to drive the second generation when it first came out. And it made a very big impact on me. My brother and I drove the car. We had it for a week. We took it to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and we were ripping around up there and having just the time of our lives. And I later wrote an article about it. And I actually have on my living room wall a photograph about this big of the Viper parked in front of the Pines restaurant in Copper Harbor, Michigan. Photographs taken by a dear friend of mine named Steve Brim, who's got an art gallery in Copper Harbor. And he had agreed to come out and take photographs for us of the Viper as we were playing around. He met us for breakfast, and he snapped this picture on the way in. And, of course, those are the best kinds of pictures because that's the one that's on my living room wall now, all these years later. And so right before COVID, I was thinking about getting a Viper, saved up my money, called my friend Mark Lieberman and said, hey, Mark, can you find me a Viper? I've told this story before, but I apologize if you've heard it. And he said, sure, what are you looking for? I said, second generation Viper. Low miles, good condition, that's all I want. He said, well, can you give me a little more to work with? I go, isn't that enough? He goes, no, there's color choices and so on. I said, well, ideally red. He goes, stripe or no stripe? I said, ideally, no stripe. Now, that year, the red had like a grayish silver stripe. I didn't like the way it looked. If it was blue, a white stripe would look great, like the one in the pictures that, you know, the one that my brother and I got to drive as a press car. But I said, no, red, no stripe. He goes, anything else? I said, preferably low mileage and, I don't know, as untouched as possible. And Mark said, okay. And by the way, Mark is the guy who runs Nostalgic Motoring, and he's helped me with the Viper and the Cobra. And so he called me back like an hour later and goes, I found you one. And he sent me pictures. He goes, original owner. It's got 4,000 miles on the clock. Everything's original. It still has the original tires on it. I looked at him like, no, what? Really? And so we struck a deal, and I got the vehicle. And I was there when it got offloaded off the trailer. And I did replace the tires. Every time I do the story and I mention the original tires, people stop listening so they can hammer out the, you can't drive a car on 20-year-old tires. Oh, my God, Steve, don't do it. The tires are in my basement. The new tires are on the car. So, got the Viper. I'll admit I made one modification to it. I had forgotten how high the seat sat in that car. And it turns out that when I got in the car for the first time, my hair was hitting the ceiling. And I got out and I said to Mark, Mark, I don't remember the seat being that high. And he goes, oh, it's a common complaint among Viper owners. You can buy a kit that lowers the seat, and you can lower the seat 2 inches. So in case you weren't sitting low enough, I got you 2 inches lower. So we did order the kit. We lowered my seat 2 inches. Otherwise, it's untouched, except for I replaced the tires, and I did some basic stuff, oil changes, things like that. But I bought it with 4,000 miles on it in 2020. And so it had been owned for 20, 21 years by a guy who put 4,000 miles on it total. You can do the math. And so since I've gotten it, I've rolled it past 10,000 miles. And as you can imagine, it means I've driven it more in the 5 years I've had it, 4.5 years I've had it, than that guy drove it in his 21 years of ownership. I don't blame the guy for doing that. He can live his life his way. I can live mine my way. But I believe I got the car. It's for driving, and I'll drive the car. My friend Mark asked the owner, why are you selling it? And he said, I'm getting older. I can't get in and out of it. And it's interesting because I have 2 cars now that I have to explain to people how to get into. And the Dodge Viper is so low that you're best off opening the door and turning around and entering backwards. And it just, you put your butt in the seat and then everything else will follow. That's how you do it. Climbing out can be a chore, especially if there's a car too close on the side, so you have to hold the door halfway open. That can be a chore, but I think it's worse for tall guys like myself. I'm 6'2", and my Cobra, in case you don't know, it's behind that. The doors in that car are really, really light, and they have almost no support, and you can't put your weight on them while you climb in the car. So you got to put your hand on the seat, because you don't want to lean on the steering wheel either. And you put your hand on the seat and lower yourself into the seat that way. It's no big deal. You get used to it. But I have to explain to people, want to go for a ride? Okay, do this, and we'll be just fine. But the Viper, for those who've not been lucky enough to drive one or ride in one, and by the way, I go to Cars and Coffee in Birmingham, for instance, and after about an hour I get bored, and I usually say, does anyone want to go for a ride? We won't do anything illegal, but I'll just show you. The Viper's got some crazy statistics. And one thing I've always liked about the Viper was that the team who built it saw to it that they increased the horsepower even just a little bit each year. Every single year, I believe, the Viper was in production, the horsepower went up a tiny little bit. Sometimes they did it other ways. All I know is you can literally see it climbing every single year, the horsepower. So mine's a 99. It's got whatever the 99 had. But you can do 60 miles an hour in first gear without redlining. You don't want to do it, but you can. And I remember reading somebody who reviewed the car and said, yeah, you can do 60 in first if you want to. Okay. The top end of the car is way up there. I've never had it pegged in sixth, so I'm not sure what mine would do, but it would go quite fast. The other thing about the car that you notice as you walk around it is it's got tires that are like, a steamroller. They're huge. And yet, despite that, people sometimes spin the cars out. Go to Nürburgring on YouTube, type in Nürburgring and Viper crashes, and you see guys somehow losing traction despite having all that rubber on the ground. And one of the problems, of course, is that if you have an older Viper like mine, it's got no traction control, doesn't have anti-lock brakes, and it doesn't have cruise control either. It's got an airbag. It's got airbags, so it's got that going for it. But the whole point is that it's just a primitive, all-American monster car. And they're not for everybody. I've had people get into it, get out of it, and go, hey, Steve, thanks for the ride, but, that's probably good. It's just a whole different thing, So, there's other fast cars out there. There's other sports cars out there. I know there's guys out there who are like into the Porsches or into the Ferraris or into the Maseratis or into the Bugattis. Yeah. But you have to understand the Dodge Viper was sold at Dodge dealerships and came with a Dodge warranty. And they weren't that expensive compared to the Ferraris and the Maseratis and the Bugattis and so on. But it still did quite well against them. So I've always liked the Viper. I think it's got really cool lines. They changed it up every few years. I never got to tour the facility where they're built, but I've spoken to people who did. And it was kind of like an assembly line, but more like there was workstations and the things moved around and they were hand-built by employees who really cared. But the cool thing is I saw a documentary about the team that designed the Viper. And what they did is they were given a building to work in. And they put a bunch of desks in one room. And they said, we're all going to be working in here because we're all working on the same project. And time is of the essence. And what we're going to do is when a decision's got to get made, we don't need to form subcommittees. Everyone's here. So what we'll do is there was a bell. They'd ring the bell. And that meant everyone come in, we're making a decision. And they would go, okay, what's the problem? And some guy would say, well, we have to make a decision now. Do we go with this or this? What are the pros? What are the cons? Anybody want to put an input? Well, this might be easier to make. Well, this might be more robust. Well, this might be, and they debate it for a few minutes. And they say, okay, let's make a vote. What are we going to do here? And they'd come to a consensus right then and there. And I've spoken to people who worked at GM, Ford, and Chrysler and other car companies in the different design groups. And when it came time to make a decision, they'd have to go and send the question to like their group leader, and they would work on it. And he'd say, well, before we make a decision, we got to talk to styling. Before we talk to styling, we got to talk to people in suspension. And there's these different groups, and they go, okay, we'll put that on the agenda for next week. And so the fact that they got this thing built as quickly as they did from when they were told to pull the trigger is mind-blowing. It really is. I can also tell you my favorite piece of trivia about the Viper is that the hood on the Viper, this part right here that flips up and flips down, is a single-piece clamshell, okay? Pretty cool. You flip that up, there's the engine, flip it down. It's a single piece, which means that if you bang it up too much, you got to replace it. At one point in time, that was the most expensive body panel ever sold for an American-made car, at least in modern times. And there were stories of guys wrecking these things real early because they didn't understand the power of it. They didn't understand the lack of anti-lock brakes. And they let it get away from them, and they got sideways, and they went over something and wound up banging up the front end and needing a new hood. So there you go. But Roy Schoberg, I've got to take my hat off, figuratively speaking, because he's the father of the Dodge Viper. He passed away at 86. He also worked on the Corvette, and he sounds like a fascinating guy. Never met him, but I've seen video interviews with him. And these are the kind of guys. Think about this. You go work for a car company, and you might get stuck working on like suspensions for subcompact cars. Might be a great job, might be a great product. But if you're a car guy, what do you really want to do? I'd like to build a really cool sports car from the ground up. Oh, there you go. How many people actually get to do that? And so, of course, Mr. Duntov would be one. Roy Schoberg would be another. So again, Roy Schoberg, known as the father of the Dodge Viper, has died. Article by Lucas Bell. Stephen, others sending me. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later.